All right, welcome back, everyone, for the second half of today's School for Politics and Critique. In a moment, we'll hear from Zdravko Saveski, but first I'll just say a couple words about him to introduce him, and then we'll get to the lecture. The title of his talk is "The Elephant in the Room: Why Capitalism is the Problem." Zdravko is anti-capitalist and eco-socialist. His recent papers dealing with the climate crisis include Towards the Green Economy of the Future, In Other World, Essays on Systemic Transformation of Future, and 1 in 7.5, Local Activism Against the Global Climate Crisis. He has recently translated 2 books dealing with the issues of capitalism and climate crisis, A History of the World in Cheap Things, A Guide to Capitalism, Nature and the Future of the Planet, and The Divide, A Brief Guide to Global Inequality and Its Solutions. So, Zdravko, if you're ready, we can begin the talk.
So, the subtitle of my presentation is Why Capitalism is the Problem, meaning that normally in the mainstream environmental cycles, they don't deal with capitalism. They deal with everything, but with some small things mainly, but they don't tackle the issue of capitalism. The maximum level that they reach is that when they say that the system unidentified is the problem. But what system we are living in? That is very important question. And my lecture will deal with the issue why capitalism is not only a problem, but the essence of the problem of the climate crisis and environmental crisis in general. That capitalism is the elephant in the room that we avoid to see. One quick reminder for starting. This is 2021. We are mostly vaguely aware that this is 2021 year, but mostly in Macedonia, in political discussions, people take for granted that the year that they are living is 1990. And it is clear that they think like this when in 2 aspects. For example, on the issue of socialism and capitalism, they think that this discussion is ended by winning capitalism, and so capitalism is something that is expecting us in the future to brighten our lives, and it is ignoring the fact that we have lived in capitalism for 30 years, and these 30 years were quite bad. The second issue why people in Macedonia think that it is 1990 is climate crisis. For most of the people, it is like a recently discovered problem that is for sure not very serious, and it doesn't concern us, but people in Africa, and it can be dealt in whatever time. We have plenty time. This way of thinking is characteristic for 1990. Maybe then we had enough time to implement some mild measures to overcome climate crisis. But today, this is very different. So that's why I emphasize to keep in mind that we are talking in 2021, not in 1990. what is the situation of after 30 and plus years of climate action? The world is taking action against the climate change for more than 30 years. So what is the current situation? The current situation is that, for example, we will see the level of global fossil fuel consumption. You can see here the level that was of the consumption of fossil fuels in 1990s. And, or I can show, yeah, you can show it. Yeah, okay. Technical problem. You can see that from 1990, when climate change was to be seriously dealt, the global fossil fuel consumption has not only reduced, but skyrocketed. Also here, you can even see more clearly that there is very little action taken after 1990. You can see on this graphic that the level of consumption of oil, of coal, of gas has skyrocketed after 1990. And last, you have with green line other renewables, which has some improvement for sure, but it is improvement that is in no way matched with the level of increase in fossil fuels. If you unite these three lines and you compare it with all the other renewable energies together with hydro, the picture is very clear. It is far from green transition after 30 years of climate action. And as of 2019, fossil fuels comprise 80% of the world's energy mix. That is after 30 years of climate action. And as a result of this burning of fossil fuels, you can see also on this graphic that how the situation with the global CO2 emissions has worsened and not improved. You have the situation in 1990 here, and you have the situation now here. Unfortunately, you cannot see the end. Yeah, they can see. Yeah, okay. So in 2020, there was a little reduction due to COVID crisis, pandemic, but it is no match of what should be done in this period. In this context, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2011 has said, quoted, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. They are not saying that we should move a millimeter, that we have all the time in the world, but that we need far-reaching and even unprecedented changes in all aspects, not in one aspect, in all aspects of our society. After 2011, there were 3 years that have passed. We are not seeing this. Not even that we don't see this in practice. We don't see this in changing of the mood of people. Mostly, what they are talking about is some millimeter changes in their lives, and mostly they even think that this is too much for them, that others should do something about climate change. What has been done in such context, of the context of necessity of far-reaching and rapid changes? Many cute words were invented. Green growth, green economy, circular economy, low carbon economy, sustainable development, clean energy, green technology, natural capital, green jobs, smart solutions. All of these are very cute words, but without essence. And without essence, all of these words are very empty and meaningless. There is too much talk and too little action. This is the situation that we are is happening in the face of unprecedented and catastrophic climate change, not in 100 years, not in a lifetime of our sons and daughters, but in our lifetimes. All of this talk about green economy, circular economy is happening under an important tacit assumption. Do not touch the system. Talk about everything, but don't touch the system. Probably because it's beautiful. And we will see how beautiful is the system, the capitalist system. What is the problem with capitalism? It is easy to say that the problem is with capitalism, but this should be argumented. Capitalism has been very successful. It has become capitalocene. It has become not only economic system, but a geological period in the history of the earth. No previous economic system was that successful. Capitalism has succeeded in this. As such, as capitalocene, capitalism has created a climate crisis, threatening the planet's inhabitability for humans and the rest of living beings. It is committing omnicide. It is killing every living being in the world. We are living in the sixth massive extinction event in the history. So we are living in a historical moment, even though we are totally unaware, most of us, that this is very important historical moment. Not in the previous decades, not in previous centuries, but for millennia. To commit omnicide, to kill every living being is totally catastrophic. And when we are talking about capitalism and capitalocene, we must keep in mind his killing practices. Why is happening? Why is this? This is due to the practices and values capitalism reproduces. Because of these values and practices, capitalism is incapable to solve the climate crisis. It only deepens, as we have seen in the previous graphics. The previous 30 years were not the period of climate action only, but also to the omnipotence of capitalism. In no moment of human history, capitalism was so powerful and omnipresent in the world. So we are living in the golden age of capitalism and in the middle of a climate crisis. The values that capitalism produces and reproduces are very important, but I will not have time to deal with this issue in this lecture. I will only say this, that an economic system that doesn't produce a value system that is in harmony with the economic practices, then that economic system will be weak, and it will be delegitimized, and it will be a question of time when people will react against it. So a type of economy must become type of society. If not, it is matter of time when it will fall. And capitalist economy has succeeded to become capitalist society. We will deal only with the practices why on this issue. But first, I will also say that capitalism has got the worst attribute imaginable. There is no worst attribute that we can imagine than this. Capitalism has become a danger to the future of humanity and the rest of the living beings. So you can say they have said a lot of things about former socialism, that it is totalitarian, that it is ineffective, and so on. But there is no attribute worse than being a danger to the survival of humans and the rest of the living beings. There is a fundamental, what is the problem with capitalism? There is a fundamental contradiction of capitalism today. It cannot solve the climate crisis without abolishing itself. So whatever it does, it cannot solve it, because solving it means abolishing itself. So, and the major dilemma arises: should we work to save the planet or to save capitalism and consumerist, our consumerist way of life? Because this dilemma is on a personal level also, because should we work to save the planet on the cost of changing our way of life? Because for many people, it is normally very good to save the planet. But with the cost of changing our consumerist way of life, a lot of environmentalists will not say yes. They want to continue their consumerist way of life and save the planet, to have the cake eaten and have it, which is impossible. How has capitalism created the climate crisis? Simply by being itself. And we will see this by seeing the structural features of capitalism. What makes capitalism capitalism? And by being capitalism, it creates the climate crisis. By being itself, it is doing that. Capitalism is a system which is profit-driven. If there is no profit in something, then it is not done. The main motive for something to be produced is a profit. As Adam Smith has said, the baker doesn't bake the bread because he is very human, but because of the profit. So, and in this process of profit-driven production, capitalism sees everything, human beings and other nature, as instruments towards gaining profit. So it instrumentalizes people and nature. Capitalism is exploitative. You cannot have capitalism which is not exploitative, because without exploitation, there will be no profit. You only get profit if you exploit workers and nature. And if you have, if you pay workers less, and if you pay for the raw materials from nature less, then your profits get higher. So there is a motive in capitalism to expand the exploitation and not to reduce. And how can we hope that capitalism will stop exploiting nature when it is based on the exploitation? To hope about this, as in 30 years before, it is very naive. Capitalism is expansive. There is expansive system. Capitalism cannot function without creating expansion. There is a growth imperative inside capitalism on micro level and on macro level. And the imperative, growth imperative, says grow or die. So you cannot not grow in capitalism. If you, for example, on micro level, every capitalist, every enterprise has some market share. If it doesn't fight for bigger market share, then the other capitalist will take his market share. His market share will shrink, and maybe the enterprise will go bust, go bankrupt. That's why a capitalist cannot be satisfied with having what he has. He must expand. It is an expansive system. If he decides not to expand, or to care for the workers, or to care for the environment, he will be eaten by the competition. So that's why on micro level, the imperative is grow or die. But what about, you have heard, we cannot have economic growth in a planet that has reached his carrying capacities. But capitalism cannot degrow. It must grow. On macro level, if you don't grow, then you will have unemployment and system instability. People who are unemployed will not have we will be unsatisfied. To keep them satisfied, you must keep the economy growing. So it is impossible to have capitalism which doesn't grow. What does it mean in the situation when the planet, saving the planet, screams, stop growing? Capitalism is disorganized and chaotic system. There is a book by Duncan Foley called Adam's Fallacy. It is not Adam and Eve, Adam, but Adam Smith's fallacy. The fallacy is this: while everybody is taking care of his personal, individual interest, the common good is kept. So you should follow freely your personal individual interests, and while all of people are doing the same, common good arises. This is the main axiom of liberalism of Adam Smith. But this can be functional when the Earth doesn't reach the carrying capacities. When it reaches, then you have micro rationality, but macro irrationality. Every capitalist is doing rationally what is best for him, but every capitalist doing what is best for him, you have systemic irrationality. You have a system who cannot stop doing the bad thing that it is doing. And because it is disorganized and chaotic, there is no government who can order them to stop that without breaking the basic logic of the system, the economic freedom that capitalism is proud of. Capitalism is so short-sighted. There is no long run for capitalism, only short run. For me as a capitalist, I should care for something below me and far in the future. This is impossible. If I don't take the business opportunities that I am facing, then someone else will take it up and I will go down. So when you don't grab the opportunities, you will go bankrupt in the end. So because of that, it is systemic feature of capitalism to be short-sighted. I should make profits now. If I don't think like this, I will go down. Destroying the future, the contra question. What about the profits? I am entitled to have profits, but it is destroying the planet. It is the other, the government should take care of it. Capitalism is extremely wasteful, careless economy. Разсипнична економия на македонски. It doesn't care about how many inputs are getting and what is doing with the outputs. So it is wasteful in destruction of natural resources because it is short-sighted. Should we take care of natural resources now to save them for the future generations? You don't have that. You take as much as you can. No matter what carelessness you're making like that. And about the waste, it is extremely waste producing system, because waste is someone else's problem. It is a feature for capitalism. When something that you create as a problem is externalized to the others, you don't deal it. If you deal it, it will damage your profits. And for you, because it is profit-driven system, this is more damaging than the wastefulness that you are producing. Capitalism has a problem with multiple and long-term usage. If it produces some long-term commodity, people and that can be used many times. What about the profits? Where are the profits? You need to have products that can be easily damaged in order people to buy more and your profits to go higher. If you don't do this, then your profits are gone. So capitalism has a problem it has with multiple and long-term usage of products. And this is what we need. We don't need single-use products because it is damaging for the nature. But this multiple usage, which is good for nature, is bad for capitalism. And capitalism is becoming increasingly unstable due to financialization. I will not go into this, I'm telling it because it is a whole big explanation. If someone wants me to explain this, I will explain, but the point is this. In this moment of time, someone will think that capitalism is very strong system and stable system. This is not true. It is becoming increasingly unstable and creating crisis, economic crisis, and this is due to financialization of the capital. So we get to the green capitalism, the prince on a white horse, and probably you see this prince on a white horse on a picture that will come and save us. So if this prince comes and save us, then we should not care about the climate crisis. It is the prince that we are seeing that will save us. And there is a quest for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail in this situation is a quest for solution to the climate crisis that will not endanger capitalism. 30 years, what are they doing on the plan of climate crisis is to find some magic solution that will not endanger capitalism, that will make profits grow even larger than today. And they have tried almost everything, but they are not questioning the system. And the system is the problem. And after 30 years, we should start to analyze whether the system is the problem. These solutions are mainly market-based solutions to environmental problems that should both guarantee business profitability while protecting the nature. And this is something that it is tried over and over again, 30 years, and someone wants to continue with this quest for the Holy Grail, to have profitability for the capitalists and to protect the nature. And this is the essence of so-called green capitalism, which is capitalism and almost nothing green in it. It aims to protect both nature and consumerist way of life, which is also to have the cake and to eat it. So how come you can have the cake and eat it? But 30 years they are trying over and over again to have the cake and to eat it. They are very famous for talking about smart solutions, win-win scenarios, thinking out of box. But paradoxically, when they say we should think outside of the box, but these green capitalists never think outside of the box. Their box is capitalism, and they are stuck into finding solutions to the climate crisis inside this box. And the box is the problem. Capitalism is the problem because it has structural elements that you cannot have a capitalism that is not expansive, not exploitative. But we need a system that should not be exploitative and should not be expansive, for example. And we will see one smart solution in the center of Skopje. This is City 3. As you can see, it is nothing but green. It is smart to have smart city 3 and very stupid and not cool to use this 17,000 euros for building this smart solution. It is stupid to build to plant trees. That is not cool. It is cool to waste 70,000 euros on this, which became gray only 2 years after it was planted. This is the smart solutions of these smart environmentalists who think out of the box but are inside the box. Briefly, I will go through green capitalist utopianism. This utopianism that they are spreading is their solutions are market-based partial solutions that hit the wall over and over again. And they are more useful to revitalize the markets than protecting nature. For example, electric cars are doing wonderful jobs in creating profits for the corporate sector and to keep growth, economic growth rising. But they are not a solution to the climate crisis. They are not saving the planet, but they are destroying it. So there are some famous green capitalist solutions, so to say, in their language. First is carbon offsetting, kompenzacija, nadomestuvanje na makedonski. So you pollute, but then you plant trees. And because you plant trees that will grow in 20 or 30 years, it is okay, you're compensating for your pollution. But that tree will be cut, for example. Maybe it will be destroyed by fires. No, I am offsetting. I am polluting and continuing to pollute, but I am offsetting. This is the solution. This is the pinnacle of market-based solution of capitalism. Carbon trading, it is good for capitalism. Let's implement it to save the planet. And their solution is cap and trade in Macedonian, ograniči i trguvaj. You set a cap, a limit, and you say all the enterprise can pollute on this until this level. And you sell so to say tickets. It is not ticket, but I cannot remember, permissions to the firms. And if they pollute more than they have a permission, they can buy from a firm that hasn't reached its top. Very wonderful market solution to the climate crisis, and this is what they are implementing for at least 15 years. But there is also structural problem with this solution. It damages in a context of globalization. It damages competitiveness of the enterprises in the country that introduces cap and trade to their firms. And even German Greens, when they came on power in 2005, they were on power then, they couldn't implement this solution because the businessmen were asking for them to raise the cap because they will be pushed outside the international markets. So it is damaging competitiveness of the enterprises, and it creates unemployment because less market share, less work for workers. So this hasn't. This was failure total. Carbon tax, nice solution, but it is also something that they haven't succeeded in implementing for 30 years. And it is clear why they are not successful in it. Because in the context of globalization and in the discourse of lower taxes, you cannot raise the taxes. So that's why they haven't implemented, and they will not implement it. If they implement it without changing globalization standards, it is unimplementable. The country that will implement will lose its competitions and market share. Privatization. The public sector is not effective. Let's privatize. The management of the forests is not effective. Then what we should do? We should privatize. But and the water, for example, we are not satisfied by the public enterprise of the water. So what should we do? According to the green capitalist, we should privatize, because the private capitalists care about his possession, ownership. A slight mistake. He cares about his profits. So if he has a forest, he will not protect it, but he will protect his profits, and he will cut the trees if there is a good price for it. So privatization is part of the problem, not part of the solution. Energy efficiency under growth imperative and stimulated consumerism. Energy efficiency is very, very important thing, and I'm not arguing against it. I'm defending energy efficiency. But under growth imperative of capitalism and stimulated consumerism, modern capitalism stimulates consumerism. If it doesn't stimulate consumerism, then there will be less consumption, meaning less production, meaning unemployment. So you must stimulate employment by raising consumerism. There is a Jevons paradox named after one British economist, Jevons, and it reads that increased energy efficiency usually leads to lower cost of use, but also increases use. And this is the problem. For example, if you make more energy efficient cars, it will mean that that car will go 1 kilometer with less fuel, but you will spend less money for that kilometer. But this doesn't mean that you will drive the same kilometers with less money, but that you will drive more kilometers because the fuel per kilometer is cheaper. So energy efficiency, when you have stimulated consumerism and growth imperative, doesn't lead to less energy consumption, but even to more energy consumption. Transition to renewable energy that will match ever-growing energy consumption. So one of the, I would say, utopian idea about renewable energy, when it ignores capitalist growth imperative, is that we can switch from this level of energy consumption, which is on fuel, with this level of renewable energy. You have seen the graphics. So energy consumption has exploded. You cannot have that level of energy produced by renewable energy sources. And this is only part of the problem. You cannot have steady state economy. The energy consumption should continue, because if it doesn't continue, you will have problem with economic growth. That level to reach with renewable energy is not utopianism. It is utopianism on cube. To have degrowth, no, recycling the ever-growing garbage. So we should continue to produce garbage, not waste. Garbage. And the solution for that is that magic called recycling. Here you have the global production and fate of plastic, which is only part of the garbage that is produced. And you can see then in 1990, the level, yellow line, the level of disposal of garbage has increased substantially, while recycling with green, I think, it has increased definitely, but see the increase in green line and in yellow line. It is not comparable. So it is not magical solution of production of more waste. Degrowth within capitalism. Degrowth is okay, but you cannot have it inside capitalism. Our economies should not grow, but degrow. But inside, within capitalism, it is economic crisis, as I have explained. If workers are laid down from, for example, plastic production sector, and reduced in number, because it is degrowth, you don't need to produce so much stuff because we have it. We need to produce multiple usage of products, not single use. If you do that, you are making degrowth, but you are creating unemployment. What is an unemployment? It is economic crisis. If it is economic crisis, it is damaging profitability, and it is creating people who are unemployed and dissatisfied from the system, who doesn't give them work. So it is utopianism to have degrowth within capitalism. And you have, for example, there is one famous environmental economist, Herman Daly. He defends the idea of steady state economics. Steady state economics by itself, it is good idea, but he is ignoring the issue. You cannot have, for the same reasons, steady state economics without questioning capitalism. And Daly is not questioning capitalism. Consumerism as individual problem, not as essential feature of late capitalism. They say that we should limit to our consumption habits. We should become green consumerists. For example, to not use single-use plastic and so on. It is okay. I am always defending that, but it cannot be individual problem because it is essential feature of late capitalism. You cannot free yourself and free people from consumerism without free them from capitalism. Capitalism creates and stimulates consumerism. It is not the problem of the individuals. It is a problem of the system who needs consumerism and who is creating consumerist behavior of the people. Green technologies and geoengineering. They have very out of reality ideas about geoengineering. I will not repeat them because they are very far from reality. I will just make an impression for you, like that is something like, let's make Peter Pan flying, but Peter Pan doesn't exist. But what if we have Peter Pan existing and he is flying? And every person who is in love with his consumerist way of life is saying, yes, they can make Peter Pan existing and flying. And that is geoengineering. What if we have that technology that can do that thing? And this is geoengineering is the best way of saying that capitalism doesn't have solution to the climate crisis. They are going to dreams, to fantasies, saying that we can do this. Okay, do it. Oh, okay, in 100 years, when we will resurrect Peter Pan. The way forward, for the way forward, there is no alternative. I agree with Margaret Thatcher, but of overcoming capitalism, there is no alternative. If we don't want to face something that is unimaginable, terrible in our lifetimes, we should overcome capitalism. There is no solution in capitalism to the climate crisis. Capitalism has structural features that cannot be taken away without changing the system. You cannot make capitalism that is not profit-driven. It needs to be profit-driven if it is capitalism. So there is only one solution now. Maybe in 1990, if there was some green capitalism, maybe it would be feasible. But now, climate crisis is so deepened then that we don't have the luxury to lie ourselves that capitalism will resurrect Peter Pan and make him flying again. But consumerist capitalism has managed to establish a class consensus. Capitalism is not today supported only by capitalists. Here in Macedonia, you will have a situation by workers virulently defending capitalism. This class consensus is made possible by providing a high level of living standard for even for the exploited one of the system, the workers. But it has been done after World War II by enormously increased exploitation of the nature. And this is consensus that will crack down quite quickly. If we don't want to face the alternative, socialism or barbarity, the reality will have us face this reality, the choice, socialism or Instead of green growth, which is impossible, or economic growth, what we need is sustainable development that includes degrowth. When we speak about degrowth, it doesn't mean that everything will go down. Some sectors will continue to go up. For example, remedying the damage made to the environment. For example, caring activities of workers to help the needed in the society. These sectors will go up. But some sectors will have to go down. So degrowth is not this. Degrowth is this. But some sectors must go down. There is a lot of surplus labor in our society, in capitalism. These bullshit jobs of David Graeber. People are working work that is totally socially unnecessary. If they are not doing that, there will be no surplus of work, and everyone will work less. There is people are mixing standard of living and quality of life. Or after certain level of living standard, the quality of life doesn't increase on the same level with the living standard. And living standard is only a mean for gaining quality of life. We don't need ever increasing consumption to be happy. What we need is optimal consumption. And anti-consumerism, this is a very common misperception. What is opposite to consumerism is not asceticism. It is rich, fulfilling life. It is to have a life that is more meaningful, more with content, and not emptied like consumerist way of life, which on the end creates emptiness and discontent. Richard Wolff often says that we can do better than capitalism. We can have richer, fuller lives and not consumerist emptiness and the illusion of happiness that capitalism is given to us. We have the economic welfare to switch to much better life than capitalism is offering us. What we need is emancipation from capitalism, to see how capitalism instrumentalizes us, how it controls us, and to start thinking and believing that another world is possible. Not some empty another world, but much better than what we are living for. We should emancipate from capitalism as a first step and organize for collective anti-capitalist action. And even more, we should do that urgently. Why? Limiting global warming to 1.5% Celsius would require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. Not something that can be prolonged, not something that it is marginal, but far-reaching and rapid. And another reminder, this is 2021. You may be unfamiliar with criticizing capitalism. but we should not only criticizing it, but changing it, and to organize to do that. And as a final thing, you have the recent photo of New York. So New York, yes, you know, the Statue of Liberty, but this is New York today. This is the splendor and misery of capitalism. And you have one detail that I like a lot, the sign, only left. Thank you for your attention. And excuse me for my bad English.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for the talk. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought our two talks were very complementary to one another and built on each other's themes nicely. I also appreciated the heavy dose of irony, which I think is, you know, enjoyable and helps the bitter pill, you know, more fun to swallow. Let's see here. Where do I want to go with this? I had a couple thoughts I just wanted to share. I mean, I really like, I already mentioned this during the break, but that you really focus on capitalism as not just an economy or an economic system, but also as a society. And that's like one of its best magic tricks, is to kind of like hide itself as a more encompassing world than it is just, you know, this area where we work and consume and spend, et cetera. But it also affects education, health, gender, you know, the whole world, and the whole spectrum of social relationships. I think that's really key to get at. So I don't mean, by and large, I agreed with everything you said. I think capitalism is the fundamental problem for ecology, but also for just, you know, human life and well-being in general. So my only like one small nitpicky thing that I wanted to maybe discuss is about the heavy emphasis on consumerism, and to question or challenge the extent to which consumerism is either the core of the problem or what's driving some of those ecological things. So I started kind of Googling around during your talk, and I was just Googling what is the percentage of like household consumer spending that is of the overall global GDP, and it's 60%, which is a fair bit. But then I started to disaggregate that and look at some of the countries, and that surprised me a little bit more. I would have assumed that like wealthier European and, you know, American societies would be at the higher end of that, but it's actually not the case. And I think that also says something about the role of consumption in capitalism overall. So what I saw was like the United States was 68%, pretty high, but Albania is 82%, Egypt is 94%, Georgia is 72%, Guatemala 82%, whereas Luxembourg 26%, Ireland 23%. So to me, this kind of, I don't know, it might complicate that narrative that it's not like individual consumer spending, even in wealthy countries, that is like such an important driver of capitalism. And I think if we think back a little bit too, I mean, it wasn't so long ago that the main socialist critique of capitalism wasn't that it produced too much, but that it produced too little, right? So this kind of critique of affluence and consumption is a very recent thing. And I think it's valid. It's of course there. I mean, this mindless, you know, endless consumption of consumer goods is a stupid thing. But I think we have to also, you know, think carefully about what kind of centrality we assign to that within capitalism, because the reason why I think this matters is I think it's enormously attractive for, especially in America, that has such a strong entrepreneurial propertarian ethos, to simply want to go back and to live simply. And so there's a lot of, I feel like, what should be anti-capitalist sentiment gets channeled into, you know, just living off the land, living simply. And if we simply got rid of all the kind of complex trappings and the iPhones, everything would somehow be better. And to me, I mean, I think back, you know, if we think back before the 1950s, the 1860s, when consumption was much lower, was capitalism not still a problem? And I would say obviously it was, and it was even an ecological problem. I mean, one example of this I think of is that documentary No Impact Man. If anyone's seen that, he was a colleague of mine at Sarah Lawrence College. He was a film guy, and he did this documentary of trying to live for a year sustainably and having zero impact, like ecological impact. And it's like, of course, it's you're doomed to fail under capitalism. And if you like get funding to make a film about it, maybe you can do it. And even then, you do it imperfectly. But I think that that can end up being a, what do you call it? It's a doomed project, because of course you can't help but to consume in the world, and in capitalism you have to consume in a capitalist way. So to me, holding up these examples, not that you were, but I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, if I could only live ethically, like no impact man, and like consume as little as possible. But to me, that just, you know, it's like a quasi-religious orientation rather than a political orientation. So to me, that's my overall concern, is the consumerism frame directs us to like a moralistic critique of behaviors, or it can, rather than, you know, looking at a more systemic or institutional critique of capitalism. I mean, I think you did this well. You showed exactly why capitalism creates those pressures to consumerism. I just think because we live in individualist societies and generally in moralistic societies, it can easily become this moralistic rather than a systemic critique by focusing on consumption. I mean, one more like final point or example is that, I mean, if we think too about like who consumes what and like the kind of wealth or class orientation towards it, poor people, of course, buy their clothes at H&M. In America, one of the biggest like stores is called Dollar Tree, where literally everything is $1, and it's a famously, you know, it's a place where poor people shop. Whereas like for elites, you know, they buy a vintage David Bowie t-shirt on Etsy, which is in fact vintage and used, right? It's not new. It's not, it is consumerism. It's a status symbol, but it's not contributing anything new. Or another bestseller a few years ago was called Shop Class as Soul Craft. And it was about this banker who quit his Wall Street job to fix up vintage motorcycles and work with his hands and do something cool. And, you know, then of course sell these things for, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. So just thinking about, you know, not consumption, but value. Like capitalism is also about the creation of value, and even things that are reused, reduced, recycled can also have value. So just focusing on the production of new commodities for consumption alone, I think misses some of those important things about capitalism. I mean, that was a nitpicky thing. I agreed with everything you said. I just wanted to talk about that.
I explained it is only one of the structural features of capitalism. It's not the only one, and it is not the most important one. First, about the household consumption that is higher in poorer countries. That is because their economies are more stagnant.
Right.
And this is the reason why, for example, Albania has more percentage of household consumption than United States.
Right.
Also, when with this data, when we have the aggregate data about household consumption, it is not disaggregated by essential needs and consumerism. So, for example, maybe in United States, the total percentage is less, but the consumerist consumption of the average citizen is bigger than in Albania.
Yeah.
So we need to know
Right.
the consumerist consumption, but we don't have that data. Only we have overall consumption, which is bad criteria. Also, what is important to know that, for example, for capitalism, it is a problem to have zero economic growth. So it has to have +3. And if we are talking for example, for something as a number of 30% of consumerist consumption in the economy, this is extremely high level. If something, if zero is not enough for capitalism, -30% is a big problem.
Yeah.
The problem, as I emphasized, I agree with what you have said. It shouldn't consumerism should not be first disconnected from capitalism as an issue and limited to individual choice.
Right.
Capitalism can survive if a very small percentage
Right.
of people don't act as consumerists. Why it is important still to emphasize consumerism as a problem, as part of capitalism, is not maybe not as a deciding factor of modern capitalist economy, which is, but on the level of values. Capitalism creates capitalist values.
Right.
And the mentality of the average consumer is, I have the money, I'm entitled to spend them as I want. But this as I want means damaging environment. But the consumerist doesn't think about the environment. He has the money and he has the liberty to spend them as they want. We need to emancipate from this point of view as liberating ourselves, as part of liberation of ourselves from capitalism. And this is even more important than the economic dimension, I think, because capitalism has his system of values. One of the most important feature is the principle of exploitation and domination. Even the workers, they, for example, they can exploit his housewife, their housewives. They have exploit nature also. And to don't care about the acts of exploitation that you are doing is part of the value system of capitalism. Capitalism teaches people, including the exploited ones, if you have a chance to exploit, it is okay to exploit. So we need a value system based on mutual aid, on caring, and this is going beyond capitalism. It is emancipatory from capitalism and going beyond consumerism means on a personal level to have a richer life, to see what beautiful is the life which consumerism doesn't provide. But also means going beyond capitalism way of thinking. And that is why I sometimes emphasize consumerism, even though I am very aware, as with the discourse of degrowth, that it is overemphasized and it is disconnected from his capitalist essence.
Right. You also mentioned the early on the destabilization of finance, and that was the other thing I was thinking is, you know, on that graph when you talk about things really take off in the 90s, that's also in the rise of the FIRE economy, finance, insurance, and real estate, most of which are not at least directly or primarily involved in, you know, the circulation of or the sale of individual consumer goods. I mean, of course, they're there to some extent, but yeah, just another thing that we don't want to we don't want to miss the other sectors of the economy that aren't the ones that we can see, because of course we focus on those, but we don't want to, if we internalize, like you said, internalizing the values of capitalism can also mean primarily understanding capitalism in terms of the things that are around us. So my my colleague Haya Heller at the Institute wrote a really great, there's an old book called The Nothingness of Meat by Carol Gilligan, or an article. And it's like, basically, you know, when you take meat and it's wrapped up in a package, it becomes a commodity, you separate it, and you have to, you know, unpack that and think about it as an animal. And she does the same thing for a banana. She says you can make the same argument for a banana. It's just, you know, even though it's not a dead animal, there's a whole collection of like labor practices and social relationships bound up in it. So when we only focus on those end of pipe commodities, we can miss all the labor and all the other things that go into it. I know you don't, I'm just saying.
Yeah, financialization that happens to capitalism from 1970s is another important issue why capitalism is not as stable as we often think. There is a big problem with profit margin in capitalism.
Yeah.
If, for example, if there is a profit in doing something, but it is not big profit,
Right.
then you can decide not to invest.
Right.
And because of this, for example, the problem with financialization is that it is more profitable. The profit margin is bigger when you speculate on financial markets or you give a loan than to invest. And the problem with green capitalism is the same in the period of the crisis of profit margins.
Right.
Maybe the renewable energies have some profit margin, but if something else has bigger profit margin, what, you're stupid? Why you should invest your money in renewable energies when you can speculate on financial market? If you are stupid and you care for the environment and do this, then the competition will eat you. Grow or die.
All right. Thanks, Zdravko, and thanks, Blair, for that interesting exchange. Katerina has a question.
Yeah, I have a question that builds on the previous question, the one that Blair asked. I kind of wanted to ask the same question, so I will just expand the question he already posed. So, or maybe I'm basing my question on Zdravko's response. Zdravko, it sounded like you thought that capitalism is some sort of a belief system, and if we expunge this, evacuate this belief system from the individual subjects living, so persons living in a society, then these subjects will will gain non-capitalist consciousness. So in a way, you will enlighten them to obtain the right form of class consciousness, become anti-capitalist, and then the change towards socialism will help. Is this your point with reforming people's capitalist mindset? And do you think that such a strategy could work?
Yeah, for example, about enlightenment, now most of the climate scientists are trying to enlighten people that climate change is very, very extremely serious issue that should be dealt very seriously. So there is nothing about enlightenment of people that is problematic by itself. I'm definitely sure that one way forward is enlightenment of the people. We need fighters against capitalism in order to overcome capitalism. in order to build fighters against capitalism, we must emancipate ourselves from capitalism, to see capitalism around us, and to stop letting capitalism as a system to control us. And also, for example, maybe someone, why this is enlightenment is very important, because some people may say, okay, we can have the whole capitalism is bad, but maybe a half of capitalism is good. Maybe it can save us. For example, welfare capitalism. And we are in very important and critical historical moment where we don't have a luxury not only to proceed on the current path, but also to make false decisions. So, for example, I will read what Bookchin has said, that capitalism can no longer be persuaded to limit growth, then a human being can be persuaded to stop breathing. And people should understand this. Capitalism cannot restrain itself from creating climate crisis. It cannot function otherwise. It cannot function without deepening climate crisis. It is like saying to the taking a bulldozer and making it restrained by, for example, taking it in a field and making it not functioning like a bulldozer, but as a machine that harvests the harvest. Yeah, you cannot make bulldozer capitalism be environmentally friendly, because it is exploitative. If there is no exploitation of nature, what about the profits? If there is no profit, why we should invest the capital? So you cannot take a bulldozer and remake it in order to harvest a field. So there is no alternative of overcoming capitalism, and reforming capitalism is something that in 1919 maybe it could be possible, but now with dependent climate crisis it is impossible.
But Zdravo, you sound like you want to reform capitalism. That's the whole thing. Blair read you the figures. The more advanced countries, the more rich countries, the less consumerism there is, because those people are enlightened and those people know that it's not a good thing to be a consumerist. It's a good thing to recycle, etc., etc. That's actually the liberal Western dream of a responsible citizen in a capitalist society. So that's one way of reading your presentation. The other way of reading it is, and I thought that you were talking about that when I asked you the question. Now it sounds a little bit different. The other way of reading it is that, you know, class consciousness will raise, therefore socialist revolution will happen with it, green revolution as well. That's what I thought you were saying. But now at this final end of your response, you sounded like, you know, you wanted to reform people within the given system. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you. Never mind.
No, my point is to make clear, to make fighters against capitalism.
Okay, maybe I misunderstand you. Yeah. But once these people gain the right type of consciousness, what happens so that socialism and green society takes place. And talking
how
about
the-
investments,
How will
do
be?
you know that green energy investments are at the top of the stock exchange investments in the world?
What is the way of transition from capitalism to eco-socialism?
Yes,
That is your question.
you
according to me.
gain no, but you gain this anti-consumerist consciousness, and then what happens?
Okay. No, anti-consumerist attitudes are part of building a person as a fighter against capitalism, and it is far from enough. It will guarantee for him better, richer life, definitely. But as I have said in my presentation, the steps are emancipation from capitalism and organizing for collective anti-capitalist struggle. So it is not only emancipation of from capitalism. It is not enough. We should organize urgently against capitalists, and not on individual basis, but on collective basis. How this transition will go on? And I make it clear mainly. So we need, instead of green growth or economic growth, what we need is sustainable development, which will include degrowth. So it means that some sectors will be abolished totally. And what about the unemployed persons? It should be added with basic income, and the scarcity in capitalism of free time will be replaced with affluence of free time. That means shortening workers' hours. If workers' hours are cut, working hours are cut by half, you can make people not unemployed, even if you degrow the economy. You will have more free time, liberate people from the drudgery of exploitative work, and give them a real chance to work on their personal human development. And you can have a degrowthed economy that can function without being focused on economic growth, and to have the imperative of grow and die or die. So it is very possible, and I must remind about the revolution and the scary word revolution that in 1989-90 period, which is where the people are stuck. It is very interesting that people here are stuck in 1990, and they forget that that revolution was mainly bloodless. The system was delegitimized in the eyes of the majority, and because of that, the ruling communist parties has fallen, and capitalism was started to be built. So when we are talking about revolution, we often think about Aurora and the Winter Palace, but you can have Aurora and Winter Palace and not having a revolution, and you can have a revolution without Aurora and Winter Palace.
All right. Blair, do you have another question?
Clarified some of those things. I mean, Katerina's comment I mean, and what you were just saying now about, I mean, of course, I totally agree that, we need to move towards an affluence based on time and, friends and family and having a richer life. But it also made me think of, the current moment, and especially the way that labor has played out during the pandemic, where there's, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the United States, there's a lot of discussion about a labor shortage right now, that people are not going to work. And there's been speculation as to why. One theory is the over-generous unemployment and or direct cash payments during COVID, which on further analysis is not true, because in many states that has ended and the people aren't going back to work. Another theory is that mostly women in the service economy had to make a choice between childcare and work, and usually it takes an entire second paycheck to pay for childcare in the United States. So, well, I'll just quit my job and take care of my kids. But then it also turned out that women were going back to work, and that theory. So a third one that this MIT economist, David Autor, he's been in the New York Times a lot lately, put out, he said, was that basically having that time away from work, mandated by the lockdown, has given people a chance to kind of reflect on what is important. So kind of what you said, to reflect on their values, and also to reevaluate what their labor is worth and what it's not worth and what's more important. But the problem with this, and that was kind of what he went with, but the problem with this, as with everything under capitalism, is highly class segmented. So I mean, I was able to stay home and work from home, and most of my friends were, because we don't work in service industry jobs, we don't work in places, in factories, things like that. So it's very easy for us to continue to do that. And these are the same people who generally have more time and want to have more leisure time than just stuff, but it's predicated on having a better position in class society, right? Whereas it's those working class people that are working in factories or that are working in the service industry who work all the time and have no time to or very little time to enjoy stuff, that the only stuff they can enjoy is in fact stuff. So it feels a little wrong to me to then, moralize against them for okay,
Yeah.
Something that makes them feel good when they have so little things. Whereas as Katerina already said, the people who have the ability to appreciate that are the people at the higher end. And if we look also historically at the kind of people who have embraced, let's say, how do I want to put it, a simplistic lifestyle, I kind of made this point already earlier, it tends to be people who are materially well off. So the 1960s, there was the whole back to the land movement. These were mostly wealthy, relatively wealthy people who could go afford to buy farms in Vermont. I mean, that's the story of how the Institute for Social Ecology was founded. A whole bunch of urban leftists bought cheap land in Vermont and, tried to live simply, but they were able to do that. Whereas working class people weren't.
There is no labor shortage in capitalism. It cannot be. You raise one of the theory that you didn't mention is with what price was labor paid. If you increase the salary, then there will be no labor shortage. So capitalists want, when they are talking about labor shortage, they in fact think we want to have workers with as less money, as less salary that we can give. So there is always easy solution to eliminate labor shortage, raise the salaries.
Yeah.
The other question. In capitalism, leisure time is a privilege of the privileged minority in the society. Eco-socialism is about making it right, not a privilege for the privileged. So, for example, about working hours, compared to the situation 100 years ago, the working time, it has remained the same and it has expanded. But labor productivity has exploded.
Right.
So the main question is, why if labor productivity has exploded, the working hours has remained the same.
Right.
And one theoretician has mentioned that there is a catch in 8-hour work. When you work 8 hours and travel back and forth to work, because of the time, share time and exploitation, you are tired in your free time. And when you take the everyday responsibilities, you can end without real free time. But if you have 4 hours, then 4 hours of work, then you can enjoy your free time. So why, if this can be shown empirically, why, if labor productivity has exploded so much in the last a century, and it is creating happier, more fulfilled people that have enough time to work, to recreate and have other activities, why then the working hours has remained the same? Because then capitalism is on a losing side. Right? When you have tired people, they want to have, they don't have energy on something to waste the time, to spend the time, except on passive entertainment. And passive entertainment is good for capitalism because it creates profits. So, dve movies su jedan udar, a Macedonian proverb. I cannot translate it.
Okay, let me just ask a very sort of quick, pragmatic question. Do you think that things like, I don't know, let's say Extinction Rebellion or Occupy Wall Street, or the sort of mass apparently sort of populist rejections of a certain strain of capitalism, do you think those actually allow for a shift in either, if we're supposed to shift completely outside of capitalism, do you think these actually allow for that sort of potential change?
Yeah, I will repeat shortly a point that I made in my presentation, is that now people are strongly trying to evade the alternatives that they are facing. The alternatives is eco-socialism or barbarism. What they want is to have this way of life continuing until their death. So they don't want to face the reality, and they want to continue with this. But the thing that they don't want to face the reality doesn't mean that the reality will not face them. And so we will have soon greening of the agendas of every ideologies. So we will not have only green socialism and green anarchism. We will have green liberalism, eco-fascism, as Blair has told. The main issue on ideological level will be what is the, we are missing the elephant in the room. So this recycling, degrowth inside capitalism, green consumerism and so on, carbon offsetting and so on, are clearly not solutions. So we are missing the elephant in the room. But what is the elephant? Is it capitalism or it is the human population? And this is very different answers. The first is green socialism, anarchism, and so on. The other is eco-fascism. There will be a big influx of climate migrants. And what we will do in such a situation? Who is to blame? Population? If you blame population, then you're totally blind about the facts about the climate crisis. And second, you're opening the door to ecofascism. So ecofascism, maybe today it is more or less isolated to some sectors of radical right, but it is the ideology of the future if we don't react. So we want to live in the illusion that for Extinction Rebellion, it can go either way. You can they can develop, and there are elements that they can develop green socialism. There are elements that they can finish in ecofascism. I don't know. It is not clear where they will go from here, because two persons can agree that climate crisis is very serious issue, but they can disagree a lot about the solutions to the climate crisis.